We are live here on SportsLine tonight on News Channel 5+. I'm Jonathan Hutton with Chad Withrow. We are with the Midday 180 on 104.5 The Zone. You can listen to us noon to 3 weekdays, along with Paul Koharski, who not with us tonight. We've been joking about that throughout the show. We'll have another Midday 180 night coming up soon. Maybe that's what Ken thought I said when he... I don't know. When we said no more SportsLine, maybe.
You gave your best wishes to Steve at the start and said something about SportsLine. Then I was trying to retrace exactly what you said about no more SportsLine.
I may have screwed it up.
That's not the case, though. SportsLine continues.
It continues, and we're here until 9 o'clock taking your phone calls. Open phones tonight if you'd like to talk about the Tennessee Volunteers. We've yet to really dive into that, and we will, with the Vols getting a huge win, massive win over the Georgia Bulldogs this past Saturday. Titans fall to Buffalo and fall to 1-3 on the season. High school sports with Chad is excellent. Prepweekly.com, the website. And you can listen to his coverage each Friday on 104.5 The Zone there. Plus Commodores, MTSU, Western Kentucky. Take it anywhere you'd like to go on open phones tonight. I mentioned Butch Jones and Steve Spurrier. He told the story that his wife Barb was going through the attic or basement or just a box of things recently and found a picture of Spurrier with the Tampa Bay Bandits from back in the day. And that was the team that Butch really enjoyed watching for whatever reason. Because when he was in school in Michigan, he interned with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So there's a connection there with Michigan and Florida. And this was a week or two ago that she pulled out this photo, and it's autographed. It says, "To Butch, Steve Spurrier." And he framed it.
When he was the coach of the Tampa Bay Bandits.
With the Bandits, yes. And he said every time they talk at midfield, or did, throughout his coaching tenures, wherever he would be, and he would see Spurrier, they would always talk Bandits football. So he has this framed photo of Steve Spurrier with the Tampa Bay Bandits. And I'm guessing it's in his office now, autographed. But I thought that was a very cool
That's great.
Coincidence.
It was really cool, too, just to hear all the different stories from SEC coaches about their interaction with Steve Spurrier, their thoughts on his career and what he means to the conference was really neat. Even from a guy like Nick Saban, who said, he's a legend. He's a guy who's meant a lot to the game, and it's sad to see someone like that leave. It's sad for the game of football to see someone like that leave the sport.
Spurrier would always tell it like it was.
Yep.
And he would let you know.
Good or bad about his team,
And he would let you know if he didn't like something that a team was doing, or he would take a jab at one of their rival schools. But, I mean, even Bobby Bowden, I think, if you asked him something about Steve Spurrier, as much as they would want to beat Steve Spurrier, it's hard to really dislike the guy because he just comes across so likable. As much as he may be a rival to Tennessee fans, I think Tennessee fans respect him. Every time that there was a job opening at Tennessee, I wonder if Spurrier would consider coaching the Vols. That would always be the rumor from fans.
I think in the 90s, when the rivalry was at its hottest, Tennessee fans hated the old ball coach, the head ball coach, Steve Spurrier. But as he kind of came back to South Carolina, even in that first year at South Carolina, if you remember, that was one of Tennessee's losing seasons. They came into Knoxville and won in early November or late October, maybe Halloween.
Was it the pink uniforms? Or was that the game that Tennessee beat South Carolina?
This was 2005, and they came in there and won. I think it may have been Halloween night, in fact. So Tennessee fans, got that bad taste in their mouth again about Steve Spurrier. But as time went on, especially the last 2 years, they beat South Carolina. You just learn to respect the guy, for what he is. And what he is the best coach in the history of two different programs in the SEC. I don't know that anybody else can say that in the history of coaching in the SEC. So he's been tremendous for the sport.
And then, including myself, I forget what he did at Duke, which is just unbelievable too. I mean, the only place he failed was with Washington and then in the NFL. So if you want to knock the guy, that's where you knock him because he didn't have success at the next level. But when it comes to college coaching, he's on the Mount Rushmore list.
Yeah, I mean, won an ACC title at Duke. That pretty much says it all, right? I mean, that shows his coaching prowess right there. But, it's not – I think people can point to, well, you didn't win an SEC title at South Carolina. I think he only got to one SEC championship game in his time in Columbia and say, well, that's a knock on him. Look at where South Carolina was before he got there. Let's look at where South Carolina goes from here also. Has he truly built something that will sustain for the next coach? Or will they revert to being the old South Carolina, who, by the way, did not even win a bowl game until 1995? until he got there. So it's pretty incredible when you think about the history of that program and what exactly Steve Spurrier has meant for that program, as well as Florida. Florida was nothing really until Spurrier got there in 1989 or 1990 and started building that program into a national power.
Why do you think Spurrier, and I'm just throwing things out as you mentioned Florida, I'm thinking quarterbacks, all the greats he coached. I still don't understand why he could not land the quarterback at South Carolina. Because that's the difference, right?
Well, and he didn't really have a great NFL quarterback at Florida. I mean, think about his best quarterbacks.
No, but he had some great college guys.
No doubt. Danny Werfel, though, Rex Grossman, a couple guys who had a nice little career, but nothing much. It's surprising to me that with that fun and gun, he didn't have a Joe Flacco. Even, someone who that guy ended up going to Delaware and has become a great NFL quarterback. He didn't have a Peyton Manning. You would think with his offenses there, he would have had that one guy who really starred in the NFL. Maybe it's no surprise why his system didn't work in the NFL. When he got there, his coaching style didn't, because he didn't produce a great NFL quarterback. Well, it's a good point. He had a lot of good NFL players, a lot of good defensive players, too. And if you remember when Bob Stoops was his defensive coordinator, he produced a lot of great players in the NFL.
Well, and think about the way things changed in South Carolina for him, because it was a different recruiting style at South Carolina. They went run game with Lattimore and defense with Clowney. I mean, it was a completely different transition from what you would expect from an offensive Spurrier.
Yeah, I think he showed how smart of a coach he was, and that those 3 straight 11-2 seasons, he really leaned on the defense, which was his strength. I think he had Steven Garcia maybe for 1 or 2 of those seasons also. Connor Shaw was the quarterback in one of those. They had good offenses, okay offenses at times, but he really relied on the strength of his team, which was that defense, and he changed up his style. You saw a lot of that this year also, where they're now just trying to get anything going. That is not a Steve Spurrier offense they're throwing out there right now, but he was smart enough to know to adapt to the personnel that he had on each roster. To me, that's a sign of a really good coach.
Live tonight on News Channel 5 Plus, open phone 615-737-7767. If you'd like to talk college football, pro football, you can take it where you'd like to go this evening. Tennessee with a massive win, to say the least, against the Georgia Bulldogs. The biggest win for Butch Jones in his tenure. Massive because they get the win going into the bye week, going into Alabama. They quiet a lot of talk in Knoxville about what's going on with the coaching staff, what's going on in the locker room, Pig Howard leaving the program, different rumors about the city and the program. Just from all accounts, the win could not have been at a better time for Butch Jones.
It was huge, and I don't think it could have come in a better way. I mean, they're down 24-3 in that game, and they showed the resiliency, that's a word that Butch Jones uses a lot, to come back and win that game at home against Georgia. And also, it's much needed for the fans. You get 2 weeks now to kind of enjoy it, to watch college football and not dread what's going to happen with your team. I think for Tennessee fans, it's a big win also. It's a program win. I mean, I think Butch Jones, and something we've talked about, Hutton, they are where we thought they would be from a talent standpoint right now. I think the team is as good as we thought. They've had a few more injuries than maybe you would want coming into a season. Now those injuries are starting to stockpile a little bit. But I think for this Tennessee team to get that win completely changes the complexion of the back half of this season. Suddenly you look at Alabama and you say they're very good. Are they going to blow Tennessee out? I don't know. Maybe Tennessee can hang in there until the fourth quarter. I mean, you look at Arkansas, they're up 7-3 on Alabama late in the third quarter. So why not? Maybe Tennessee can hang around with Alabama. And then after that, the Vols are going to be favored in probably all their games from that point on. I think at Kentucky, at Missouri, the 2 most challenging games. But their schedule gets a lot easier in the SEC after that Alabama game. Suddenly you're looking at a team that if they just win the games they're favored to win, could go 8-4. And if you went to a Vols fan before the season and said, I will give you 8-4 and not watch it down this year, you would have taken it in a heartbeat, especially with a chance to get 9 wins in a bowl game, and with an 8-4 record, probably a pretty good bowl game against a pretty good opponent. So I think that would be huge for Tennessee right now. And it was, I think, a program-affirming win for Butch Jones. The heat was starting to pick up a little bit, which I think is ridiculous from Tennessee fans, but it was starting to get loud about Butch Jones, his coaching decisions, everything else. Well, it's amazing how smart you look when you come back and your players make plays, which, quite frankly, Tennessee had not made a lot of plays in the clutch. Tennessee wouldn't make a play in this game in the fourth quarter. Preston Williams drops a pass. It would have been a 40-yard gain. But then the next play, they'd come back and get a 25-yard gain on a play. So that was the encouraging thing about Tennessee. they didn't let those playmaking opportunities affect them, and they came back and made big plays in the game and beat a really good Georgia team who was obviously also down with the loss of Nick Chubb. So thoughts and prayers with him as well.
Man.
Just a gruesome-looking injury. You never want to see that. So where does this Georgia team go next also? But I think a very encouraging sign for Tennessee and that program to get that win. It completely changes the outlook of the rest of the season.
Well, they had breaks go their way. There's no question that Georgia could have tied that game very easily with a touchdown late. But you can't knock Tennessee for
20
that.
Also on the one, we had a punt that took a left turn out of bounds.
That's right. Yeah, but the breaks went Tennessee's way. We could say the same thing for Florida against the Vols in Gainesville. So things worked themselves out from that standpoint. I really just thought big things about Butch Jones and the way that team responded down 24-3 in that game, because we saw that from Arkansas in Knoxville. They come right out of the gate after losing some games earlier in the year, down 14-0 on the road in the SEC, and Brett Bielema's team did not quit. Tennessee did not quit on Saturday, and that's the biggest takeaway for me against Georgia. They win the game. That's first and foremost. But like you said, the way they won it, that speaks volumes for the way that roster's built. Well,
and even the staunchest Butch Jones defender, I think, started to have some questions about how the team was responding to him, because it was just so heartbreaking the way they lost those games. And, for fans who think they're heartbroken, the coaches and players are even more heartbroken losing games like that. So I think the fact they stuck with it and won a game like that is big, and it's a sign that this team has not quit on Butch Jones. That's something he's doing and his coaching staff's doing, is connecting with these players, which I think is huge, especially coming off a week where they had the allegation of Butch Jones punching a player or being in a physical altercation with a player. That comes out after a few losses. They had to battle that all week as well. You had a senior offensive lineman in Matt Crowder, who was a part of that, who played in the game, and he suffers an injury. So adversity after adversity, you look at it, they're down 24-3, and you think the season's over. Maybe they can get to a bowl game. Suddenly they turn it around. They're down 24-17 at halftime. They get the win in the second half. And now you're looking at that Tennessee team and saying, okay, now they're starting to deliver on some of that promise they had preseason. And you look at that schedule, and I think people who are fans of other schools even look at it and say, they're better than most of those teams down the stretch. They should win those games. So I think it's a great opportunity for Butch Jones and Tennessee to kind of cement some of those preseason expectations on them. Still a very young team. Still a lot of things to look forward to next year, no matter what happens down the stretch here. But Tennessee's in a great spot here going in the back half of their season.
How much do you think the early deficit helped them keep the foot on the gas throughout the game? Because that's been the main critique offensively, is they just haven't closed teams out in the fourth quarter. In this case, they had to play from behind and did a nice job.
I think they did a much better job of understanding what Josh Dobbs does well also. To your point, Hutton, they had to go for a 4th and 3 and a 4th and 7, which kind of loosens up the play calling, right? Maybe they didn't have to, but they felt like they did at the time. So when you're in a game like that and you're going to need to score points, it opens up the playbook. But I thought rolling Josh Dobbs out, using Alvin Kamara like the Swiss Army knife that he is as a player, I thought the passes over the middle to Ethan Wolfe, that's his game. That's the one ball where you look at him from the pocket and he throws it very well. That seam pass to the tight end, they hit that a few times for big gains. The wheel routes, they got some things going that Josh Dobbs does pretty well. That's what you have to figure out. He's not going to magically turn into a great, accurate pocket passer this year. But you can win a lot of games with Josh Dobbs. He's a great runner. He can throw well on the run, and there are passes that he makes really well. You need to design your playbook around that and not necessarily everything else. So I thought they did a much better job of adapting the play calling to Josh Dobbs and what he does well. And what's the result? 430 yards of offense, and the first player in the SEC to go over 300 yards passing and over 100 yards rushing since Johnny Football. Only 2 other guys have done that, Tim Tebow and Johnny Football, and now Joshua Dobbs.
Open phones tonight here on SportsLine, 615-737-7767. He's Chad Withrow. I'm Jonathan Hutton. SportsLine on News Channel 5 Plus rolls on. Stay with us.